Clara's pulse raced as she navigated Manhattan's crowded sidewalks, the city's energy buzzing through her like static. A flash of James's familiar leather jacket across the street sent her heart into overdrive, his predatory stare cutting through the throng of tourists. She ducked behind a hot dog cart, her breath shallow, praying the crowd would hide her. In her haste, she collided with a man in a charcoal coat, his coffee splashing onto the pavement in a dark cascade. His gray eyes locked onto hers, sharp and unyielding, as he steadied her with a hand that felt too strong for a stranger. "Watch your step," he said, his voice a low rumble that drowned out the city's noise. Clara mumbled an apology, her gaze flicking back to where James had been, now lost in the sea of faces. The stranger's grip lingered, his presence a quiet shield against the chaos of honking cabs and shouting vendors. "Running from someone?" he asked, his tone probing but calm, like he already knew the answer. She forced a smile, brushing her curls back, her fingers trembling slightly. "Just late for work," she said, but his raised brow suggested he saw through the lie. He pressed a card into her hand, silver embossed with Luca, and a number, then vanished into the crowd. The card burned in her pocket as she hurried toward the subway, its weight a strange comfort. James's shadow felt closer now, his texts from burner phones haunting her for weeks. She glanced over her shoulder, half expecting his sneer, but saw only strangers. On the train, Clara studied the card, Luca's name sparking a mix of curiosity and caution. The memory of his steady gaze lingered, a stark contrast to James's suffocating control. She tucked it away, unsure why it felt like a lifeline she wasn't ready to use. At her diner job, the clatter of plates couldn't drown out her unease, James's presence lingering like smoke. A coworker, Mia, noticed her distraction, joking about her haunted look over the coffee pot. Clara laughed it off, but her eyes kept darting to the door. A late customer slid into her section, his polished shoes out of place among the diner's worn booths. He ordered coffee, his voice clipped, and left a tip with a note. "Call Luca. He can help." Clara's stomach twisted, wondering how this stranger knew her secret. Back home, she triple-checked her locks, the city's hum outside her window no longer comforting. Luca's card sat on her counter, its silver letters catching the dim light. She hesitated, fingers hovering over her phone, torn between fear and the pull of his promise. Her phone buzzed, an unknown number flashing, and her heart stopped, expecting James. Instead, a woman's voice invited her to a gallery event, claiming a friend's recommendation. Clara's instincts screamed caution, but the chance to escape her apartment's walls won out. The gallery was a world of crystal chandeliers and hushed voices, Clara feeling small in her thrift store dress. Across the room, Luca stood by a vibrant painting, his presence magnetic, drawing every eye. Their gazes met, and he crossed the crowd with a predator's grace, whispering, "You didn't call, but I'm here anyway." Clara froze, his words stirring a mix of relief and dread, the city's pulse fading under his intense stare. "Why me?" she asked, her voice barely audible over the gallery's murmurs. Luca's smile was sharp, promising answers she wasn't sure she wanted. As the night took a dangerous turn, Clara's hands shook as she clutched her wine glass, Luca's presence beside her a quiet storm in the gallery's glow. Memories of James flooded back, his charming smiles that morphed into demands she'd change her clothes, her friends, her dreams. 2 years of control had left scars she still felt, even in this glittering room. Luca guided her to a quieter corner, his hand light on her elbow, yet commanding attention. "You're not just running from a bad day," he said, his eyes scanning her face like he could read her past. Clara looked away, the weight of his gaze too much, too knowing. Her phone vibrated in her purse, another unknown number, and her stomach churned with dread. She ignored it, but Luca's glance suggested he noticed, his silence louder than words. "You don't have to tell me," he said, "but I can make it stop." His offer hung heavy, tempting and terrifying. Back at her apartment, Clara paced, the gallery's glamour replaced by peeling paint and creaking floors. James's voice echoed in her mind, his promises to fix her independence with gifts that always came with strings. She pushed Luca's card under a book, afraid of what calling him might mean. Mia's text lit up her phone, urging her to come to a rooftop bar to forget her troubles. Clara hesitated, the memory of James's last threat, delivered in a calm, chilling tone, making her wary of open spaces. But staying caged felt worse, so she grabbed her coat and left. The bar was alive with laughter and neon lights, but Clara's eyes scanned for James in every shadow. Mia waved her over, her carefree grin a stark contrast to Clara's taut nerves. "You need to live a little," Mia teased, unaware of the danger Clara felt closing in. A man approached their table, his sleek suit and sharp smile reminding Clara of Luca, but colder. He complimented her dress, his words too smooth, and slid a napkin with a phone number her way. "For when you need a real friend," he said, his eyes glinting with intent. Clara's heart raced as she excused herself to the restroom, the napkin crumpled in her fist. She caught her reflection, pale, eyes wide, a woman on the edge, and wondered if Luca's card was her only way out. The thought of James finding her here made her chest tighten. Outside, the city's skyline glittered, but Clara felt trapped, her past a weight she couldn't shake. She pulled out her phone, fingers hovering over Luca's number, when a shadow moved behind her. It wasn't James, but the man from the bar, watching her with a predator's patience. She bolted for the stairs, her pulse pounding as she descended to the street, the night air sharp against her skin. Luca's card was still in her pocket, a silent promise of protection she didn't fully trust. But as her phone buzzed again, she knew she was running out of places to hide. The street was quieter now, but Clara felt eyes on her. The city no longer a refuge, but a maze. A black car idled across the road, its tinted windows hiding its occupant, yet she sensed Luca's presence. His voice from the gallery echoed, "I found you anyway," and she wondered what price his help would demand. Clara's fingers brushed the card, her resolve wavering as she stepped into the neon-lit night, James's shadow and Luca's mystery closing in. She dialed the number, her voice steady despite her fear, and said, "I need your help." The line connected, and her fate shifted, pulling her deeper into a world she didn't yet understand. The black car glided through Manhattan's glowing streets, its silence louder than the city's hum. Clara sat in the back, Luca beside her, his presence a mix of comfort and danger. "You're safe now," he said, but his eyes scanned the shadows outside. The car stopped at a sleek skyscraper, its glass facade reflecting the moon like a blade. Luca led her through a private elevator, his hand brushing hers, sparking a warmth she didn't trust. The penthouse doors opened to a world of marble and starlight. Inside, the city sprawled below, a glittering trap Clara couldn't escape. Luca poured her a glass of wine, his movements precise, like a man used to control. "Tell me about him," he said, his voice soft but commanding attention. Clara's fingers tightened around the glass, James's threats replaying in her mind. She spoke of his jealousy, how he'd track her phone, his voice a constant in her nightmares. Luca listened, his face unreadable, but his silence felt like a promise. A soft knock interrupted, and a woman in a crisp suit entered with a tablet. "Your meeting's set for tomorrow," she said to Luca, ignoring Clara's presence. Her cold efficiency hinted at secrets Clara wasn't meant to know. Luca dismissed the woman with a nod, his gaze returning to Clara, intense and searching. "Stay here tonight," he offered, gesturing to a guest room that screamed wealth. Clara hesitated, torn between safety and the unknown cost of his protection. Her phone buzzed. A photo from James, her outside the bar, alone, vulnerable. The message read, "You can't hide forever." Her breath caught, and Luca's hand on her shoulder felt like an anchor in a storm. He took her phone, his jaw tightening as he studied the image. "He's bolder than I thought," he murmured, his voice edged with something dark. Clara saw a flicker of ruthlessness in his eyes, a glimpse of the man behind the charm. The penthouse was quiet, but Clara felt the weight of unseen eyes watching her. She wandered to the guest room, its plush bed a stark contrast to her cramped apartment. Sleep felt impossible with James's threat, and Luca's mystery coiling around her. A leather-bound book on the nightstand caught her eye, its pages marked with cryptic notes. One word stood out, Rossetti, a name that sent a chill down her spine. She closed it quickly, sensing she'd stumbled onto something dangerous. Luca appeared at the door, his silhouette framed by the city's glow, unreadable. "You're wondering who I am," he said, stepping closer, his voice low and deliberate. "Some questions are safer unanswered, but I'll keep you safe if you trust me." Clara met his gaze, her fear battling a strange pull toward him, his promise a lifeline. "What's the price?" she asked, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. Luca's smile was sharp and he said, "Stay, and you'll find out." Morning light flooded the penthouse, casting long shadows across Luca's pristine floors. Clara stood by the window, the city below a maze of secrets she couldn't unravel. Luca was gone, leaving only a note. "Stay inside. I'll be back." A soft chime announced breakfast, delivered by a silent housekeeper with guarded eyes. The tray held coffee and pastries, but a folded newspaper caught Clara's attention. A headline whispered of a shadowy figure tied to city deals, and she wondered if it meant Luca. Her phone was silent now, James's messages blocked by Luca's tech team overnight. Yet the absence of his threats felt like the calm before a storm. Clara paced, the penthouse's luxury feeling more like a gilded cage than a refuge. A knock broke her thoughts, and Mia's voice called through the door, urgent and familiar. "Clara, let me in. I know you're in there." Her friend's presence was a shock, a reminder of a life that felt distant now. Mia burst in, her eyes wide with worry, clutching a crumpled flyer for the gallery event. "How did you end up here?" she asked, glancing around like the walls might bite. Clara hesitated, unsure how much to reveal about Luca's world. A framed photo on a side table caught Clara's eye. A younger Luca, with a man in a sharp suit, both unsmiling. The resemblance between them hinted at family, but the coldness in their eyes spoke of something darker. She tucked the thought away, unsettled. Mia grabbed her arm, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I heard things about this guy, Clara. He's not just rich. He's dangerous." Clara's stomach twisted, Luca's cryptic notes and the headline flashing in her mind. The elevator dinged, and Luca returned, his presence filling the room like a storm cloud. Mia froze, her bravado fading under his piercing gaze. "Your friend should leave," he said, his tone polite but laced with steel. Clara walked Mia out, her friend's warnings ringing in her ears, but loyalty kept her silent. Back inside, Luca watched her, his expression softening just enough to notice. "You're still here," he said, almost surprised. "That's a start." A delivery arrived, a sleek dress and an invitation to a charity gala that night. "You're coming with me," Luca said, his voice leaving no room for argument. Clara felt the weight of his world pulling her deeper, her choices narrowing. She touched the dress, its fabric cool against her skin, a symbol of a life she didn't understand. The invitation mentioned Rossetti Enterprises, the same name from the book. Clara's pulse quickened, sensing a thread she couldn't yet pull. Luca stood close, his breath warm against her ear as he whispered, "Tonight, you'll see who I really am." Clara nodded, her heart torn between fear and a dangerous curiosity, knowing each step with him was a step into the unknown. The gala sparkled under chandeliers, Manhattan's elite mingling in a sea of silk and ambition. Clara clung to Luca's arm, the dress he'd chosen hugging her curves, making her feel both exposed and invincible. His hand rested lightly on her back, a quiet claim in a room full of whispers. Faces turned as they entered, some with awe, others with guarded curiosity. Luca moved through the crowd with ease, his smile charming, but his eyes scanning for threats. Clara felt the weight of attention, wondering what they saw in her, a guest or a pawn. A man in a pinstripe suit approached, his grin too wide, his handshake lingering. "Luca's new muse," he said, his tone dripping with insinuation. Clara stiffened, but Luca's grip tightened, his voice smooth as he deflected with a warning smile. Across the room, a woman in red watched them, her eyes sharp like a hawk's. Luca leaned close, whispering, "She's a Rossetti. Stay close to me." Clara's heart skipped, the name tying back to the book, the headline, the danger she couldn't name. The music shifted, and Luca pulled her onto the dance floor, his movements fluid, commanding. "You're doing fine," he murmured, but his eyes darted to the crowd, tracking someone Clara couldn't see. Her skin prickled, sensing a storm brewing beneath the glamour. A waiter brushed past, slipping a note into Clara's hand, his face blank but urgent. It read, "Leave now. He can't protect you." Clara's breath caught, her eyes searching for James, but the crowd was a blur of faces. Luca noticed her tension, his hand guiding her to a quiet balcony overlooking the city. "What's wrong?" he asked, his voice low, searching her face for answers. Clara hid the note, her trust in him wavering under the weight of secrets. The night air was cool, but Clara felt heat rising, the note burning in her clutch. Luca's gaze softened, and he touched her cheek, a gesture too tender for the man she suspected he was. "I won't let anything happen to you," he promised, but doubt crept in. A commotion inside broke the moment, raised voices, a glass shattering. Luca's posture shifted, predatory as he led her back to the chaos. Clara saw the woman in red arguing with a man, her words sharp, mentioning the deal and betrayal. The man from earlier, pinstripe suit gleaming, approached again, his smile gone. "Your ex is asking questions," he said to Clara, his voice low, threatening. Luca stepped between them, his presence a wall, his words cold. "He's not her problem anymore." Clara's heart pounded as Luca guided her toward the exit, the gala's shine fading into menace. The note's warning echoed, but Luca's hand in hers felt like her only anchor. She glanced back, seeing the woman in red watching, her expression unreadable. Outside, a car waited, its engine purring like a beast ready to strike. Luca opened the door, his voice steady but urgent. "Get in. We're not safe here." Clara slid inside, the city's lights blurring as they sped away, her world tilting into a game she didn't know how to play. The car sped through New York's underbelly, neon lights blurring into streaks of color. Clara's heart pounded. The note from the gala crumpled in her fist, its warning etched in her mind. Luca's silence beside her was heavy, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. They stopped at a dimly lit diner, its neon sign flickering like a dying star. Inside, Luca ordered coffee, his eyes never leaving the door, as if expecting trouble. Clara watched him, torn between gratitude and the growing weight of his secrets. A waitress with tired eyes served them, her glance lingering on Luca with recognition. "You're back," she said, her voice low, hinting at a history Clara couldn't grasp. Luca nodded, slipping her a folded bill, his movements swift and practiced. Clara's phone buzzed, a text from Mia. "Don't trust him. Meet me at the pier midnight." Her stomach twisted, the betrayal in Mia's words at the penthouse still raw. She hid the screen, but Luca's sharp gaze caught her hesitation. He leaned closer, his voice a whisper over the diner's hum. "You're holding something back," he said, his tone gentle but probing. Clara's throat tightened, the note and Mia's message warring with her need to trust him. A man in a leather jacket entered, his gaze locking onto Luca with cold intent. Luca stood, his posture shifting to something lethal, and nodded Clara toward the back exit. The air crackled with tension, the diner no longer a safe haven. Outside, the alley smelled of rain and rust, the city's pulse distant but relentless. Luca pressed her against the wall, his body shielding hers as footsteps echoed nearby. "Stay quiet," he whispered, his breath warm against her ear. A faint scar on Luca's jaw caught the alley's dim light, a silent story of battles Clara could only imagine. She wanted to ask about it, but the urgency in his grip kept her silent. His world, she realized, was built on scars, seen and unseen. The burner phone in her pocket vibrated again, a single word flashing. "Rossetti." Clara's breath hitched, the name tying her fears to the cryptic notes in his penthouse. She glanced at Luca, wondering how deep his secrets ran. A distant siren wailed, cutting through the alley's stillness, and Luca's eyes narrowed. He pulled her closer, his voice a low murmur. "They're watching us, but they won't touch you." The promise felt like a chain, binding her to his danger. Clara noticed a tattoo on his wrist, partially hidden by his sleeve, a symbol she didn't recognize. It pulsed with meaning, a mark of loyalty to a life she was only beginning to understand. Her fingers brushed it, and Luca's gaze softened, just for a moment. The footsteps faded, but Clara's heart didn't slow, Luca's closeness stirring something dangerous. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice barely audible. His eyes softened, and he said, "Because you're worth saving." Back in the car, Luca handed her a burner phone, its screen blank but heavy with purpose. "Use this if you need me," he said, his voice firm but laced with vulnerability. Clara clutched it, feeling the weight of a choice she wasn't ready to make. Her apartment key felt foreign in her pocket, a relic of a life she could no longer return to. James's threats, Mia's betrayal, and Luca's world were closing in, each pulling her in a different direction. She glanced at Luca, his profile sharp against the city lights. A radio in the car crackled, a voice mentioning Rossetti and the docks. Luca's jaw tightened, and Clara realized the name wasn't just a clue, it was a threat. She tucked the burner phone away, her resolve hardening to face whatever came next. As they pulled into a hidden garage, Luca turned to her, his eyes dark with unspoken promises. "Tonight, you decide who you trust," he said, his voice a challenge. Clara nodded, knowing her next move could change everything. The pier was a skeleton of rusted beams, the Hudson River lapping at its edges. Clara arrived alone, the burner phone heavy in her pocket, Mia's cryptic text pulling her here. The air was thick with salt and secrets, the city's glow a distant comfort. A figure emerged from the shadows, Mia, her face pale under the moonlight. "I didn't want this," she said, her voice trembling, but her eyes darted nervously. Clara's heart sank, sensing a trap in her friend's unsteady words. Footsteps crunched behind them, and James appeared, his smile sharp and triumphant. "You came," he said, his tone dripping with possession, a gun glinting in his hand. Clara froze, the pier's isolation amplifying her fear. Mia stepped back, her apology barely a whisper before she fled into the dark. Clara faced James alone, his eyes gleaming with the same control she'd escaped years ago. "You're mine," he said, stepping closer, his voice a venomous promise. A low hum cut through the night, headlights piercing the fog as Luca's car roared onto the pier. He stepped out, his presence a storm, his eyes locked on James with lethal calm. "Step away from her," he said, his voice cutting like a blade. James laughed, raising his gun, but Luca moved faster, disarming him with a fluid motion. Clara's breath caught as Luca pinned James to the ground, his strength terrifying yet protective. The pier felt smaller, the air charged with impending violence. A second car screeched to a halt, men in dark suits spilling out, their faces hard. "Rossetti's men," Luca muttered, pulling Clara behind him, his hand steady on her arm. She realized the trap wasn't just James's. It was a larger game. The wind carried the scent of diesel and decay, the pier's edges blurring into the river's black depths. Clara's eyes caught a glint of metal in the shadows, a second gun, hidden by one of the men. Her pulse spiked, but she stayed silent, trusting Luca's instincts. Luca's voice dropped, a whispered command to her. "Stay low, no matter what happens." His confidence was a lifeline, but the weight of his world pressed against her chest. She crouched, the wood beneath her creaking under her weight. A flicker of movement caught her eye, a figure watching from a nearby boat, its silhouette barely visible. Clara's mind raced. Was it another of James's allies, or something tied to the Rossetti name? The uncertainty gnawed at her, sharpening her senses. The burner phone vibrated again, a message from an unknown source. "He's lying to you." Clara's grip tightened, the words sowing doubt about Luca's intentions. She glanced at him, his focus on the men, unaware of the storm brewing in her mind. Luca faced the men, his voice low but commanding, negotiating in clipped tones. Clara's heart raced, the burner phone vibrating with a message. "Trust me, run when I say." She gripped it, her trust in Luca now her only lifeline. The men circled closer, their intentions clear, but Luca's presence held them at bay. He whispered to Clara, "Go now," and she bolted toward the pier's edge, her sneakers pounding against wood. A shout echoed behind her, followed by a scuffle. Clara hid behind a crate, her breath ragged, watching Luca handle the men with ruthless precision. James lay motionless, the fight drained from him, but the Rossetti men were relentless. Luca's eyes found hers, a silent promise to end this. She clutched the burner phone, its screen glowing with Luca's earlier words, grounding her. The pier's chaos faded as Luca approached, blood on his knuckles but his gaze soft. "It's over," he said, pulling her to her feet. Clara looked back at James, his threat silenced, the Rossetti men retreating into the night. Luca's hand in hers felt like a vow, but the pier's shadows whispered of dangers still lurking. She followed him, choosing his world over her past. Luca's penthouse glowed with dawn's first light, the city waking beyond its windows. Clara stood by the glass, her reflection a mix of exhaustion and resolve. Luca watched her, his silence a question, waiting for her choice. The night's events replayed in her mind, the pier's violence a stark contrast to this quiet moment. She touched the bruise on her wrist, a faint mark from James's grip, now a symbol of her survival. Luca's presence behind her felt like a shield, but heavier. He poured coffee, the aroma grounding her in the present, and sat across from her. "You don't have to stay," he said, his voice honest, offering freedom she wasn't sure she wanted. Clara met his gaze, seeing truth in his storm-gray eyes. A news alert on her phone mentioned a disturbance at the docks, quickly buried. Luca's influence, she realized, stretched further than she'd imagined, shaping the city's narrative. She set the phone down, choosing to face him instead. His hand reached for hers, fingers brushing her knuckles with a tenderness that belied his power. "My world's not easy," he said, his voice low, raw with vulnerability. Clara felt the pull of his life, dangerous but alive with purpose. A knock at the door broke the moment, a man in a tailored suit entering with a file. "Rossetti's backing off," he said, his tone clipped, respectful. Clara caught the name again, a shadow that would never fully fade. Luca dismissed the man, his focus returning to Clara, intense and unwavering. "You've seen me at my worst," he said, stepping closer. "If you stay, it's your choice, but I'll protect you with everything I am." Clara thought of Mia's betrayal, James's defeat, the life she'd left behind on that pier. She stood, closing the distance between them, her hand resting on his chest. "I'm not running anymore," she said, her voice steady, certain. A faint scar on Luca's hand caught the morning light, a reminder of the violence he wielded for her. Clara wondered about the lives he'd touched, the enemies he'd buried, and what it meant to stand by him. Her fingers traced the mark, a silent question unanswered. The city outside roared softly, its rhythm a contrast to the penthouse's stillness. A newsstand below caught her eye, a headline about a missing businessman tied to the docks. Clara's stomach twisted, sensing Luca's hand in the story's silence. A letter slipped under the door, its wax seal stamped with an unfamiliar crest. Luca's eyes darkened as he read it, his silence a wall Clara couldn't breach. "Not your concern," he said, but his tone hinted at a new threat rising. Clara's reflection in the window showed a woman changed, her eyes sharper, her posture stronger. She wasn't the girl who'd run from James anymore, but Luca's world was reshaping her into something new. She met his gaze, ready to face whatever came next. The city outside hummed with life, its chaos no longer a threat, but a backdrop. Luca's smile was sharp, a promise of a future forged in trust and danger. Clara felt her fears dissolve, replaced by a strength she'd never known. A photo on the mantel caught her eye. Luca alone now, the man from before gone. She realized his world had losses too, and her choice to stay was a vow to share them. Their hands intertwined, sealing a bond born in fire. The morning light painted the penthouse gold, a new day unfolding with possibilities. Clara looked at Luca, his eyes reflecting her resolve, and knew she'd found a home in his chaos. This was her beginning, dangerous, beautiful, hers. They stepped onto the balcony, the city sprawling below, alive with secrets they'd face together. Clara leaned into Luca, his arm around her a quiet promise of forever. She was no longer the woman who ran. She was the one who stayed. Thank you all for watching this story. If you're loving it, drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video. Your support keeps these stories coming.